If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button as well as the bell to be notified of future videos. Thank you.
Hello Internet, we are back and I must tell you I'm excited. We have a fellow here, he was at Bridge 14. Now there's a lot of people not in South Africa who will not know what Bridge 14 is. That was a major battle. And he will tell us about it. He was a young man still, he's a young man even today. And he's by the name of Ferdie van Niekerk. It's odd to me how many van Niekerks we have on this show. I don't know why, because in Afrikaans, Niekerk, it means not to go to church, but we will leave it there. Ferdie, thank you. Thank you for your time. You're one of those who had to wait almost a month to get hold of me. I'm afraid that's getting to be the norm now, but we're grateful for that. May I ask you first, where do you come from? Tell me about yourself, your parents, and how did you end up in the army?
Hello, Chris, and thank you for the opportunity. Me, I'm an old Boksburg boy, born and bred, and went to the law school, Baanbreker. I was born in 1956, which makes me almost 65 years of age. And I must say, with no regret, I've lived a full life. And what happened during my life was a lot of incidents that fell in place and that eventually turned out to be milestones which will fall into place as we go on later. I went to high school, and I was a lazy little sod. And I convinced my mother that my IQ wasn't right. And she then, the norm those days were, if you didn't do well at normal school, you go to trade school. So I went to the Brakpan Technical High School, and in Standard 8, which was very hard because in the first 2 years, you basically do all the trades that's available. But for some reason, I wanted to become a motor mechanic, which would also fall into place why that was an important thing, which was actually fantastic. And I think today's kids lose out on so much by not going to schools like that, where they learn a skill. And some of those skills I learned in that school took me right through life. In 1974, I matriculated in 74, and that was the December. By that time, I got my call-up papers for Potchefstroom. And but I must just say, one of the things that happened was my brother, my middle brother, shame, he also passed last year. We were in the Dutch Reformed Church, and we were not forced, but we were very actively in Sunday school. And in those days, the youth movement was quite strong in the school. And my folks, being very open and friendly, always invited the guys to come to our house, and they would sing and have youth church meetings. And his best friend saw my sister, and of course a little bit of a romance started there. And they had a younger brother, which I was in Sunday school with. But lo and behold, he registered for army duty in Boksburg, and I did in Brakpan. And lo and behold, we landed up in Potch, the only two guys from Boksburg in the same regiment. So it's amazing that that paragraph goes, that chapter goes right through the events and the life cycle of what we went through. It so even went more bizarre. He went to Angola with me, and he was on his birthday, which my birthday is on the 23rd of November, he had his first contact at the Battle of Ebba. And lo and behold, what happens? On the 10th of December, which is his birthday, the Battle of Bridge 14 happened. So it was just this amazing bond that we've carried through, and we are friends for life, you know, and it all started in those younger days. I had a full life until in the army. It was very awkward because you had that 6 months before you went to camp, and I sort of decided I wasn't going to university. So I found a decent job in the freighting business, and bought my first little Mini. And yes, I was in love with that little brown Mini. Eh? And it's amazing when when I went to the basics in the army, all I was thinking about on Friday night is driving around in my Mini, you know, and with a tape deck stuck underneath the back seat, you know, and I should just flick my hands down and in, and whoops, and in goes bad company, you know, and it was a magic time. Then I think my father and mother. My father was a train driver for the railways, and I remember he was very proud of that job. And he came home one day, and he was the driver of the blue train, which was amazing. I mean, he was so proud of that. And I remember as a kid, he used to drive the commuter trains between Joburg and Springs. And I used to go to the Boksburg East Station and wait for him, and then jump in the front and drive with him to Springs, and then come back and I'd jump off again at the station. And also then he had this big trommel, you know, which he had to carry his food in. And my job was to polish that thing, because he couldn't go to work without him seeing his face in that. So I know all about brasso and cleaning of shoes. That was my job. My mother, shame bless her soul, was the salt of the earth. The whole family turned around her. And shame, when I was in basics, she couldn't wait to bring me a packet of slop chips, you know. And I remember our camps, when we used to be able to get visitors, in came a big packet of chips. It's been my weakness in life, and she understood that. Yeah, and then I think it started off by going to basics. And I mean, I think when I went to the army, we met up in Joburg, and then off we went by train to Potchefstroom. They picked us up at the station in these old Bedford trucks. By that time, it was about 4:30 in the afternoon. And we got a roofride. I don't know if the English guys will understand what a roofride is. Is you sit in the back of that truck and they let fire. They just go away. And you got to hold on for life. And we went outside. Our camp was about, say, 15 k's outside of Potch on the Ventersdorp Road. The Dirkie Ice skitbaan, you know, the army artillery shooting range there. And that's where 14 Field Regiment was situated. And I remember turning off the tar road and onto the sand road, and I looked out the top of the old Bedford through the flapping sail on the top of the thing, and all I saw was nothing. I mean, there was a big metal shed, which was the canteen, we later found out, and a lot of these little fiberglass, we call that maanhuisies, which is like, look like a igloo. And yes, you know, we offloaded that, and there we standing around in our jeans and lang hare, and you know, we thought we were still like a city meneer, you know. And the next thing, the window opened up of one of those little igloos. Yes, and a man came out there. We later found out he's the RSM. I don't know what RSM was, but he had the moustache like a Harley Davidson handlebars. I couldn't believe my eyes. I've never in my life seen a moustache like that. And when he opened his mouth and he shouted, it was like a I mean, it was unbelievable. I thought, oh, I'm dead. I'm dead. Yeah, because this man, he put the fear of God in me, because he was shouting at another guy that a truck had broken down, and he didn't got another truck and fixed it up to get the guys in the camp. And I said, oh, this is it. Wow. I just couldn't believe it. And then this, rest in peace, old Samuel Long Dirk Venter. Yes, what a man. And we got divided up, and lo and behold, me and my mate Gideon Voorges, I was going to the locating battery, which is part of the artillery, where they you go into the radar to pick up the mortar fire, and that. I was supposed to go there, but I landed up at 2 medium battery with him. Oh, we weren't divided in the same tents, but at least I knew somebody there, But we settled in, and there was no tents. We had to put up the tents still before we could sleep, there was nothing. So then basic started. We got a sergeant major, Samuel Pretorius. But yeah, I don't know, that man's a sadist. But he had this little female voice, and the joke was at the battalions in the morning, when the whole regiment is lined up there, and then they'll start at 141 battery, and Al Sampi, what was his name? Sampi, the RSM, their sergeant major, and he had this deep voice, 141 battery, and everybody got to attention. Then they got to 142, and old Peppy Click, he was another gunslinger, and he would, and we got to our little 2 medium battery, attention. Yes, we were disgusted, man. And then, so I must say, but this man had other qualities. He told us the first day, he's going to make soldiers out of us, whether we like it or not. We thought, oh, okay. And then we started with this basic training. But I must say again, that there was no infrastructure in that camp in Potch. There was a tap. The tap was about 150 meters away from the tents. And it was on the main entrance to the Potch camp. Then the next entrance is where you go into the shooting range. Now, our camp was right there. So it was quite a distance from the canteen. And we soon found out we had to run wherever we went. And to run with those new boots on, and but anyway, and of course, in June, Potch, I don't know, that place just freezes up. It's unbelievable how cold it gets. I mean, you come from a warm house, and are you sleeping in a tent, and those browns itch, and the boots don't fit well, and yes, there's no extra jerseys or nothing. You could, and at 6 o'clock in the morning, that Sergeant Major Pretorius on his bicycle all the way from Potch, which is about 15 kilometers. At 5 o'clock, he must leave home to get to the camp at 6. By that time, he would sneak up on you, and lo and behold, you'll find 2 or 3 stompies lying around. So before the day even starts, you're running up the trees, around the trees, and the fire buckets outside our tents was frozen solid. The 44-gallon drums of water for fire was frozen up. And then you had to run to fill them up with fresh water every morning. Yes, it was another story. Then basic progressed. And this man, one of the most funniest things I've ever seen. We never had a classroom, where we did gun drill and, all these things. It was against a koppie, the little mountain. So we sat among the rocks there, and how many guys in the battery? 100 and something odd guys in our platoon. Now we're all sitting along the rocks, and now he's showing us how this works and how this do work. And of course, by 1 o'clock, the sun is out, and we had an Englishman with us. Hunter was his surname. And our Hunter, he dozed off once. And then the sergeant major says, stand up, sit. And yeah, you up and down to wake us all up. The next thing is, this poor guy had to get into the fire bucket, the big 44-gallon drum in. So that didn't even help. The next day, lo and behold, Hunter falls asleep again. So there he says to him, you see that rock? I mean, it was a huge boulder. So take it to my office. This poor skinny guy struggled to move that rock and half an inch in an hour. It was the funniest thing. And we had to sit there with straight faces to look at all of this. It was hilarious. Then we went on, and the one day we had the sports parade, and I used to run marathons before I went to the army. So I was a serious runner. So I thought one of the sports is landloop. So I'll become a cross-country runner. So we all lined up there, and there's all this, and there was Springbok athletes there amongst us, you know. So lo and behold, I get selected for Northwest Province to run in the SA Championships. So I got to the sergeant major and I said to him, look, I've been selected to run. He says, no, that's fine, congratulations. And he gives me time off on the Saturday to go and run it was in Carletonville. Next thing, I phoned my mother up, and lo and behold, my mother and them arrived with a packet of chips. Yeah, I wish, needless to say, I didn't do fare too well in the race. But then I started scheming, and I thought to myself, hell, this PT, I don't like that much running in a squat, because, you know, you run with that rifle and we're all running in the squat for. So I go to the sergeant major and I said to him, listen, I've been selected for a marathon runner. Can I go and train on my own? So he says, no, I'll think about it. So the one afternoon, off we go. And for the guys that know Dirkie Ice shooting range, Barkin 186 is that's the thing everybody aims for with the guns to shoot at. Because you had this reach which we deployed the guns in, and then it's like a valley, and then the landmark was there, and then it was a perfect, because you could see where you were shooting. So we were running past, we were way past 18 Barkin and 186, and that's probably 7-8 kilometers out. So he stops the squad. He says, where's that marathon runner? I thought, oh God, he says, right, you can go and train now. So then I had to run in front of the squad now. So I had to run like hell to get a gap. I thought, no, this is out. So the next day I went there, I said, no, sorry, I've decided I'm not running anymore. So he said, yeah, I knew you were taking a chance. But anyway, one thing I must say, we got hidings in the army. We had techie parades. So if you didn't do anything else, you physically were, punished. And it was very traumatic for guys, because some guys were in their 30s already when we were there. And I mean, meaning now we're 18 years old. So there was a huge gap. These guys that came out of university, and they battled with this, being treated like that. But in hindsight, it's probably because when we got to that battle situation, that inbred discipline, that's what saved our lives. So it was tremendously, it wasn't fun at the time, but it was good. Another little funny story was, there was a Jewish guy. His name was Adam Saville. Now everybody called Adam Saville, So he tells the sergeant major, I want to become a chef. Anything to get out of potch. So he stands up and he says, hey, his father runs this restaurant and he's the chef in the restaurant. He can cook whatever. He thinks that the best thing for him is to spend his time as a chef in the army. So the sergeant major, Patoos, look at him. He says, okay, you can become a chef. and they sent old Saville off to Pretoria to go on a course. A month later, he's back as our chef. I tell you what, the poor man, he was devastated because he thought this was his chance to get away from some patours, and he was back there. So nobody could, he couldn't not cook because everybody time would say to him, listen, but you're supposed to be this gourmet chef, come up with the standards, you know. So yeah, it was funny. Eh? We also had a guy in our tent. We were four. We were four in our tent. Was Frank Barragero, was a Portuguese guy. Eddie Wenzel, Zogby, who was a Lebanese guy, and myself. So we were like the United Nations in this tent. But our Frank Barragero, bless his soul, wherever he is in life, his feet, when he took those boots off, we nearly died. It was, I've never smelled something like that. It was terrible. Then we'd come in at about 4:30 in the afternoon after a day of training and running around, and he would just plop on his bed and sleep. Now, we never had showers. We had mobile showers. So they had this big mess tent with a mobile van. So everybody lines up in this tent, kalgat, you know, we're all standing there. And then 6 go in, and they put the water on for a minute, then you wet, and they put it off, then you soap. Then you all stand and you wash, and they put the water on for a minute, then you wash off, and out you go again. So old Frank, 5 or 6 times, he just never came to a shower, and it was just terrible. You know, eventually we had to do something about this guy. And then he also landed up in a 44-gallon drum. Eh? It was absolutely. And then we had this guy, bless his soul. He became one of my best friends, Chris the Nation. Yes, but he was a big boy, and he couldn't run. And the sergeant major had a vendetta against him because he was always slow, and he was typically the guy that couldn't climb over the obstacle barrier, and you know. And many a times, Chris, and because I was the landloper, everybody knew that I was supposed to be fit. I had to help him. So then I would take him by the arm and drag him, you know. And he was also instrumental, and my bond with him will come out later because he was my buddy in Angola, you know, for guard duty, and he was on the same gun. So Chris the Nation, he became a minister, and also recently retired, and but he's still with us, which is great. By the way, we started a little. One of the guys found out, and of our 2 million battery, I think we're about 30 or 40 guys that now communicate on Facebook. And if I look at my Facebook profile, that's most active channel is there, and it comes from any kinds of thing what happens in guys' lives, and it's fantastic to and we had a couple of Zoom meetings where we would, you know, talked about the old days, and some of the guys all over the world, you know, and a lot of them have passed away, but there's still a fair amount of them around. I think I must just talk basically what timelines. We went in the June intake. We started with a basic training, which was basically 3 months of infantry and basic training. Then that was now July, August, September. We started with gun training. Although we were a medium battery, let me just explain the batteries at 14 Field was 141, which was the 120 mil mortars. By the way, in my opinion, the best weapon out there in any war for that. That is a devastating weapon, the 120 mil mortar. Then we had 142 battery, which was the 25-pounder medium gun, the 25-pounder gun. Then 143 battery was the old Sextons. that they used. It was a tank basically with a 25-pounder on it. Also used in the Second World War. Then we had 2 medium battery, which was the 5.5 artillery guns, and then the radar locating battery. Although we were medium, we never were given the big 5.5 guns. We did our training on the 25-pounder, which is it's a fairly look. It was one of the best weapons in the Second World War. The range maybe 10-12 kilometers if you're lucky, but it was basically a medium, a smaller artillery gun. So we started our basic training on that. It's got a crew of 6. You got your number 1, which is the commander of the gun. Then your number 2 works the bridge, and the number 3 does the sights and firing of the gun. 4 and 5 and 6 are the ammo guys. They prepare the what do you call it, the bomb. Just so the artillery guys are going to shoot me now that I can't remember the projectile. Sorry. and because the different fuses, because you get air burst fuses, you get ground burst, you get all kinds of chemical fuses and everything. So we were then divided up into the batteries, and we did our training basically September, October, and we never finished the course. And we went to we did a big maneuver there in Turkey Ice, which we deployed, and we were firing, and they were seeing whether you could work accurately in that. And then the one day we got this huge bonus where they said you could fire 3 rounds in rapid fire. Now, any artillery, that gives you, excuse my word, but it gives you movement in your trousers. There's absolutely no other word that happens when you get that order for doelvuur. And yes, then the competition was out. You can see who could fire the 3 rounds and who was the most accurate. So it was fantastic. And then, but our captain, which was Ferdie van Niekerk, he kept criticizing us that we're not shooting accurately. And yes, we couldn't understand this, you know. And I mean, we double checked the distances and the measurements on the sights, and he kept saying, "Oh, we off target." But I think with hindsight, it was deliberate, because lo and behold, after the day's exercise, it was now really about 6-7 o'clock. He came and he started shouting, and you know, typical. Can you believe it? Let me just switch this off. So anyway, he started shouting at us and telling us that we're useless and we don't know what we're doing. And for punishment, we have to push the Bedford and the gun back to camp. Now, are we talking about 10 kilometers in the dark? It was like, anyway, yeah, see, so yeah, we start pushing. Now we're 7 guys, 6 on the gun plus the driver of the truck. It didn't take us long to figure out that we can start this truck and let it idle in gear, and we pretend to be pushing. So we pushed this truck in the dark, and we were singing full mouth of, you know, any song you can think of, just to try and dampen the noise, you know. But now we got away with it. And then afterwards he said to us, no, they had to just, you know, do it to us, you know. But it was part of the training that we were physically and mentally broken down. I think they succeeded, bar one guy. And lo and behold, he was on my gun, a guy by the name of Donnie Bauer. And this guy was a lifesaver at Durban Beach. And wherever he walked around in camp, he was in his Speedo. And he was like he was just a guy that couldn't handle discipline. He couldn't handle anything. And they eventually gave up on punishing us because of his behavior. And he eventually landed up on my gun. And what a nice guy. But he was one of the guys who was adamant, this sergeant major is not going to break him. And I'll tell you what, I admire his guts sometimes for what he did. I think one of the other comical things when the first pass came out, when we could go and the married guys could go home first. So old Samuel Pretorius is standing there and we're sitting among the rocks. And he says to the guys, now it's going to be in Afrikaans. He says to the guys, now don't go, as julle nou huis toe gaan, los julle balsakke by die huis, by die kamp. So old open the dear says, Samuel, what's my wife going to say when I arrive at home without my balsack? I mean, he just turned around and walked away because that was just too much for him to handle. I had an accident. Well, we were doing pole PT where we had to run with this big thing. And typical army, they give a short guy and a long guy a pole, you know. And what had happened, we run, and the guy I was sharing was a short little ass, and he dropped the pole. And the pole on his side hit the ground and then went up and came down on me. And it flattened me. Yes. And the schema I thought, this is it. Now I'm off to hospital. And I faked an injury like second to none. Yes, and off on the stretcher, and I'm crawling with pain. And so I landed up in hospital in Potch. And I laid there for about 4 or 5 days. What a pleasure. Of course, I get back to camp, and all my mates have had a weekend pass, and I don't have a pass. So, hell, that sucked. So all I could think about was my mini and the Boksburg ice rink, because there were all the girls were. Hell, and from our Potch, where our camp was, you could, in the distance, see the road to Joburg, and on a Friday night you see all those lights going, and depression sets in. So I got back to camp, and then a week passed, and then nothing happened, and then I said, no, I plucked up all my courage and I went to the summer. Now, when you go to the sergeant major, my pants were shaking. You didn't know, your tongue was in your mouth, because I must go back to what I said. I never knew people like that existed in this world. It was like unbelievable. I was just petrified. And I plucked up the courage and I said to him, hey, this isn't fair, man. He said, what mean? I said, I haven't had a pass yet. He said, why? I said, I was in hospital. He says, no, man, no. We can't say he gives me a pass. So I go home. And of course, I get home and all I can think of is my bed. Now I'm going to sleep in my own bed. And I get there, and lo and behold, my sister and her husband from Pretoria came to visit, and they're sleeping in my bed. So I had to sleep on the couch. Now, that's about the only criticism I could give my mother. Until today, they just couldn't get why I was so upset, because I couldn't sleep in my bed. They said, you should respect your sister and her husband, I said, yeah, okay. Come back to my story in life. I always had to be the one that compromises and give in. So I said, okay, fine, don't worry. I'll sleep on the couch. It's better than sleeping in an army bed, put it that way. But I went back and we arrived, and bless my brothers, bless his soul. He took me all the way back to Potch, and we got to camp, say 10 o'clock at night. So he had to drive back all the way to Boksburg. And I get back into my room, and I left my keys for my locker at home. And I went ice cold. Shame. And he had to drive back to Potch to bring me my keys, because, obviously Monday morning is parade. You got to be on parade and inspection. And it's a shame of that. But he did it with a smile. And I always had when I could, I helped him out in life. And We actually had such a good relationship, me and my brother. It was amazing. So I get back the Monday, and something is not right in the camp. There's a vibe. And suddenly we find out that all our officers are gone. Our sergeant major is gone. And one of the gun, he was the captain's driver, a guy by the name of Rudy Harold. They're all gone. And it wasn't long before the rumors came out that they've gone to the border. So we thought, something's brewing. Now, subsequently, they were, it comes with a timeline which I'll discuss with the independence of Angola and that, but it fell into the timelines that on short notice, the army had decided to deploy South Africans to help the FNLA win over Luanda, because there was a huge power struggle going on for control of Luanda, because that would control Angola. So they had moved off and were flown into northern Angola, and they actually fired on Luanda with the 3 artillery guns, 5.5s, which our 5.5s that was there in Potch went up. They flew them up with C-130s, and they soon discovered that they were outgunned by the Russians and the Cubans that had already deployed. They were evacuated, but I'll talk a little bit more on that operation, because it was quite a key thing. Then, about a week later, we were all summoned to the parade ground and names were read out. And my name wasn't read out, but my friend's name was read out. And they said, come back, you off to the border. And I don't care what anybody says, but your pants shakes. I mean, you get these Rambo guys that, I don't know, I even challenge some of those reckies that say their pants weren't shaking. I don't believe that. So this was now serious. And the guys flew off. And we would meet up in Angola again. So then there was about 40 of us left in the battery, because they picked all their buddies and whoever they thought were the best troops were. And I suppose we were the scraps left behind. Plus it was our 4 instructors, the 4, the guys, the previous year's instructors, they were left behind. They were the only ones there. And we subsequently were told, come, it's your turn. So we off to Pretoria, and we started loading a train. We had to physically tie the guns down, the gun tractors with cables, and it was one hell of a job. And we weren't a lot of guys, you know. And right at the back of the train, they put a little passenger cart, and they gave us 5 days worth of rat packs, and they said, there you go, and off we went. The sad thing is we were never allowed to shower after the loading of the train, so we were full of grease, and really, you know, it was a forerunner of what was coming. So anyway, it took us 5 days by train up to Grootfontein. We got to Grootfontein and we went to the famous transfer camp, and we chose a tent, but they were all underwater. You know, so you know, there was just no chance of doing anything. I remember celebrating my birthday in the Deurgangskamp, the 23rd of November, not knowing that that day was probably one of the saddest days in the army or Operation Savannah, because it was the day of the Battle of Ebo, where the Cubans had built up and set a trap for the South Africans. And they had the Eland 90 Panzer cars and the 25-pounder guns. But just to take one step back, when my friend and them arrived, the first batch of guys arrived, they couldn't fit the Bedford gun tractor into the C-130. So they were issued with Unimogs, brand new Unimogs. And the Unimog could handle the weight of the 25-pounder. But when they were deployed in Angola, the back end of this thing couldn't handle the weight of the ammo. And so the guys there was no protection. They had to sit on top of the ammo, the gun crew. So it was totally chaos. The trucks were all painted brown and they had to be repainted green because of the tropical climate up there. So basically, what I'm talking about, the Battle of Ebo, was basically just what I've read up about it. The Cubans had set a trap for the South Africans and they fell into it with the head and sinker because the Eland 90s were just totally not suited for the terrain, and they met up with some heavy firepower, and I think they lost 8 or 9 Eland 90s that day. There was a couple of guys got enormous cruxes there for absolute bravery of saving those guys that were trapped inside those Eland 90s that went back. And there's a lot of stuff on the internet about that battle. Our 25-pounder guns, they were totally outranged. And I remember my friend Gideon telling me that they were still deployed, and the sergeant major, PF sergeant major, came driving past in his Land Rover and shouted, "Stop, vier hak op." And as he raced down the road, they looked at him and they said, "No, where's he going?" You know, but he was out of there. And then they had to pack and race away and run for their lives, you know, which was not a nice thing to happen to the South Africans, but it did happen. And my version might differ from guys that were there, but this is what I've read and what I've been told what happened. They were totally outclassed, not for bravery, but purely equipment-wise. Then I think the army realized that they had trouble, and they deployed 4th Field Regiment, which was the previous intake guys that had to now clear out in July. They were there with the medium guns, and they were firing. So to get back to my experiences, so we landed up at Grootfontein, and we were in this massive warehouse. I don't know if people remember the old Deurgangskamp. That it was quite an impressive, building with all the ammo and everything there. And we were called in there, and I remember in the train going up. Now you got a guy had a little transistor radio, and I remembered old Prime Minister John Foster coming on the radio and saying, "No South African troop will ever fight across its borders." And I believed him because I wanted to believe him. And we were walking around in this warehouse, and we saw all these maps of Angola on the floor laid out, and I still believed we wouldn't be going. Then we were called up, and they said that there's a special operation. No word was ever mentioned in Angola, that we had to volunteer to go, and it's in fighting communism. We must actively get involved to save South Africa. Now, as an 18-year-old, I didn't worry about what the consequences was. I was just not going to be shown to be haven't got the guts in front of my mates. So I signed the document to say that I'm going voluntary. One guy out of our regiment didn't go. He said he's not going. His father had a car dealership in Van der Bijl Park, and he was going to inherit this, and he ain't going to lose out on that chance. So he stayed behind. I won't mention names, but he'll know who he is. Anyway, so we're off. So they took us to a little warehouse, and there we got these. We had to first take all our dog tags, anything South African jockey underpants, Colgate, Palmolive toothpaste, whatever, anything that had a South African connection, we had to leave behind. So we had to then get our browns out, and we packed them all away, and we got these one set of green, like a light green, a not dark bottle green over a shirt and a pants. Our boots had to stay. So we went into a room, and about a meter deep was all these tackies, sneakers. We had another racist name for them, but I won't mention that. You know what? But they were all size 8. You could choose any one you want, but they were all size 8. Oh, and there we are. You know, I wore a size 10 shoes, and my poor toes were like all like this. So it didn't take us long to cut the front part out, and you just had the sides. And we stood there, the pride of the South African Army, with our tackies on, and we were given PPH rifles, which was a Russian-made round magazine, biggest rubbish out, misfires every time you pull the trigger, and then it just jams up. But that was our rifles. And then we got like an East German steel helmet. It very looked like the old German helmets, but it was much wider, you know. And yes, and there we were. Now we're ready for war. And I still believed we weren't going over our borders. And the planes arrived at Grootfontein. We loaded the 4.55 guns into two into C-130s. And a Transall arrived for us, so we're in the back now. And I don't know if the captain of the plane had sick state of mind, but he said to us, oh yeah, we just crossed the South African border. We're now, Southwest African border, we're now in Angola. And I thought, no, can't be. Anyway, so we flew. Now you're thinking, like, this is the end of the day. So he comes on the radio again. He says, listen, this airport we're landing at, it's not too lekker kosher. What you do is, I'll keep the engines running. You run out, I'll open the back door. You run out, you take around the fence, and I'm out of here. So he says, don't worry about grabbing your own kit. You just grab a bag and run. So the plane lands, and I'll never forget the little transit at the top, a little round window like that. But when you can't look out of it, you got to stand. And when I stood up and I looked out this window, all I saw was this building that was shot to pieces, the airport building, and it was a town called Sela. So we out the plane, and we were taking defense, and off goes the plane. And suddenly, out of the bush, comes all these black soldiers. Now, I mean, I thought, this is it. Oh my hell, what the hell? Meanwhile, it was all the UNITA guys, and they were really, they just couldn't get enough of us. They were patting us on the back and on the shoulders and help us carry, you know, the guns were there on the thing. So now we're sitting waiting, and my heart's racing. I think, oh, now what have I got myself into here now? But anyway, the next thing, these Portuguese vegetable trucks arrive. And they were like orange and way out colors. So we're on the back, and they take us to the little town. And they stop, and there's like deserted Portuguese houses. And they said, well, make yourself comfortable in these houses. So we start sweeping out and getting ready now. And the next thing, a Jeep comes down the road. And it was full of Portuguese mercenaries. But thoroughbred killers, you could see these guys were not there to mess around. So he stops the guy, and he comes walking over, and he says, welcome. So, well, okay. He says, well, better get your kit inside. It's going to rain now. I looked up at the sky, and there wasn't a cloud in the sky. And I thought, can't be, man. lo and behold, within a half an hour, the heavens opened up. I mean, central Angola is tropical, you know, and the water came down. It was amazing. But as soon as it stopped raining, the water was gone again. It just evaporates, you know. So that was my first experience of Sela. And I'll never forget lying in that house in the morning. Now, why we were lying there is they couldn't put the McGirris gun tractors in the plane, so they came up by convoy. Now, Sela is about 200-300 k's from Luanda, if you can place it on a map. When we go through, I'll point it out in the map where the areas are of Sela and where Bridge 14 and where all the battles were. So we had a week of lying idle. But now bear in mind, we had never done training. We never fired a 5.5 gun. We were used to the 25-pounders. And a medium gun is another story. You're shooting a 90-kilogram projectile. If you're lucky, we were lucky. Our gun could get a range of 22 kilometers accurate, which was the best gun the army had at that time. And funny enough, the 4 guns, there was 4 guns then standing there. They parked them on a road. And we did our gun training there. We were then, because our 4 instructors were with us, Bombardier May, Bombardier French, Bombardier Van Sail, and who was the 4th one? I'll get to it now. But anyway, they gave us that final gun training. So the first time we fired a 5.5 gun was in the town of Sela. We just fired it randomly. And we did our gun training, and I was a bit nervous. I'm a funny guy. You know, I'm not a natural first-time doer. You know, and to work those sites, the problem is I can't remember things straight away. You know, if you talk too fast to me, it goes over my head. So I had battled a little bit by getting the distance and the bearing of the sorry, that you had to fire. But I must say, my number 1, which was Bombardier Van Sail, was very understanding. You know, he said, "Don't worry, we'll do it." So we did our gun training, and we were now waiting. So we were walking around this little town called Sela, and we go into this house, and there's weapons, guns, rifles. I mean, again, a meter deep. So I just want to have a drink of water quickly. Talking too much. So we go in, and there's a guy sitting there. And he says, "And this?" I said, "Help yourself." The guys pulled out Sanas, the old Boer War guns, rifles. I picked myself a nice little Sten gun, which was a World War II 9mm gun. I thought, this is cool. It's better than the PPH thing. So now we want to fire these guns. So and I've never been able to fire R1 on automatic. And there was an R1 there, so I took myself an R1 and I took the Sten gun. So next room was all the ammo. So we go to the guy and say, "We can't have a couple of rounds we want to shoot." He says, "No, take a crate." So what do you mean? He says, "Take a crate." So I walked out there with a crate full of 9 more rounds and R1 rounds. Needless, we fired that. And I mean, it's the most useless thing on automatic, R1. I mean, that's just unbelievable. But the Sten gun was fun, because I mean, you can pull that trigger and it just empties that magazine. And I was so glad that I actually chose that, because during guard duty in the rain, the fitted lovely underneath your poncho, you know, it just hang there. And it was not a heavy gun, a rifle to carry, you know, it was actually very cool. And, you know, you look like a real soldat, you know. So we stayed there, and then the guns arrived, the gun tractors arrived. And by this time, we're talking probably 5th of December. But maybe I should just take a step back and just explain a little bit, but what had happened, why this war, what had happened, and why there was so much drama. It all started in Portugal. In 1974, there was a military coup in Portugal, and they ousted the then Prime Minister. And one of the aims was to get rid of the Portuguese colonies in Africa, and to liberate and get more of a socialist thing going in Portugal. So they told the Portuguese, the Angolan people. By that time there was a counter-insurgency war against the Portuguese going, but it was very intense. And the three main factors, political parties at that time, was the FNLA, which was more to the north of Luanda and Cabinda. You had the MPLA, which was basically the people in Luanda and vicinity, and then UNITA, which was the southern Angola. Yeah, what happened was they call it the coronation revolution. Basically, it means that it was a battle won without a shot being fired, because the Portuguese just capitulated. They basically said to the thing on the 11th of November 1974, you're going to get independence. So there was a huge scramble. The FNLA was supported by the Congo, Zaire, but those days was the Congo, and they actually pushed the Congolese army in to help the FNLA. UNITA was sort of left out of the main battle because they never had they weren't near Luanda, and the MPLA was there. So what had happened was that, remember now my first weekend pass when the guys flew up, that was basically but the 6th of November, because suddenly they realized the guys that have the territory are the ones that's going to win. So they flew in 26 South Africans and a permanent force guys with 3 guns, and they had to support the FNLA in winning over Luanda. But they failed horribly because they were outranged. One gun just wouldn't work properly. And then the whole Navy exercise came into it because the President Steyn was sent up, and the other frigate was the, excuse me, let me just get my facts straight here. But neither way, the 2 frigates went up. One was stationed at Walvis Bay, the other one went deep past Angola near the thing. And if you remember, the frigates had the Wasp helicopters, and they airlifted the guys out from and brought them back. The 2 remaining 5.5 guns were then moved to, was towed into Zaire, and they were picked up by the SAS Tafelberg and were taken back to Walvis Bay. So, but that was like our captain, Commandant Joffel van der Westhuizen, which was later head of the army, he was part of that exercise, and it didn't go well for the South Africans, but thank God no lives were lost there. Then on the 11th of November 1975, the MPLA officially took charge. The FNLA lost most of its influence because the Chinese government decided not to back the Zairian or the Congo army. And of course, you know, when your paymaster leaves, you also leave. So the FNLA became non de grata in the war, really. They were there, but they weren't really a force. The story goes that the American government were backing South Africa. Truth behold, they were never. It was a secret CIA operation. It wasn't long after Vietnam. They had some funds that they were putting in. There was rumors that we were going to be paid danger pay by the American government, and there's guys that's still trying to find documentation to prove that. But needless to say, the story then goes that in the Washington Post broke the story of the South African involvement there, and that's just started an explosion because the American government just came out, and it was the Clark Amendment that documented that they were not going to fund another foreign war. So if you look at the timelines, we were in there for about 4 or 5 months already by then, the South African army in various forms. And they then decided to leave or not support the war. UNITA then pleaded with Minister Foster to remain there. And it was amazing that it was on the one day before the main battle happened, Foster said, yes, South Africa will remain there. So to get back to the Sela story, we were then, you know, we were drilled in proper artillery World War hierarchy of a major in charge of you. Then you got your OPs, and you got your technical guys that work out your ranges and bearings and lieutenants and everything. So we looked around in the morning. We were climbed onto the trucks to move out. There was none of that. It was just us, you know. We had one lieutenant, and he was not our lieutenant. He was from Fourth Field. Escaped me his name. I've been really trying hard to find who he was, but I just can't remember. It's 46 years ago, eh? So give me a break. Anyway, so the first rule of artillery is you are not seen, you are not heard, you move at night, and you lie down in the day and you shoot them because it's the supplies factor. And the funny thing was, we moved out in broad daylight, and off to war we went. So we went, and we got to this quarrygat. I don't know what you call it in English, but it was a dugout. But it was probably the best artillery site I've seen. When you look down on this photo, you'll see the proximity to the road and where there was an embankment that we deployed behind. Now, bear in mind, this is 3 kilometers away from Bridge 14. Now, Bridge 14 was blown up by the Cubans. Not a huge bridge, but it was a significant bridge for the road to Kubala, which was, the Cubans had come in and sort of, the town before Bridge 14, that's the Battle of Ebo, where they gave UNITA and the South Africans a blood nose. They then decided to move back and to Kubala, and they were going to reform and then take on the South Africans head on. From what I've read, because in this little group we've got on Facebook, we've made contact with some of those Cuban guys, and I've read their versions of what had happened there, and they openly say they were the Cuban elite forces. They were so confident that they were going to annihilate these Boers, that they were going to wipe the floor with us, that they never even dug in properly, they never deployed properly, they never got their guns positions correct. Now, there was the road, there was a little neck, two mountain ridges had passed, and then you'd pass into this valley, and then there was huge mountains on the left-hand side of the road. And then the road made a bend, and then you got to the bridge. Now, the South Africans managed to get, probably some of your special forces friends, they managed to establish an OP post there. Excuse my coughing, man. And they had a fantastic view of the battleground, the arena. They saw the movement of the Cubans. They had them plotted. But 4th Field Regiment, which was also 5.5 guns, were deployed behind the neck. And they were firing, but they were hitting the targets near the bridge because they had huge mortar positions. They had the BM-21 rocket launchers, and they had artillery pieces. So there was a force, quite a big Cuban force there. And but they were outraged. So what the army and the wisdom decided is to sneak us in right behind, and I'm not exaggerating, we were probably 20 yards behind the 81mm infantry mortars. Now, anybody that understands a mortar, that's a 2-3 kilometer range, maximum if you're lucky, on an 81mm. So we moved in with the 3 guns. One gun, Bombardier May, he was transferred over to Battle Group Orange, which was fighting the border, the war along the coast up to Luanda. And so he was seconded to them. So it was just the 3 guns of ours. Bombardier van Sail, which was my gun. The Bombardier French was the second gun, and they were all the Soties. All the English guys got together, and they were on a gun, but they had an Afrikaans driver, so he was the BE guy there. So and subsequently, Johan, he's a great guy, and the third gun was Bombardier French. So we deployed basically 2 guns in line and 1 to the front. Now, we were number 1 gun, number 2 was Bombardier French, and Bombardier Wallace was the third. That's the third guy. Yeah, they were the third gun. And so we deployed, and we were behind this wall. So the lieutenant from the infantry with the mortars. Now they're all standing watching us. He says, hey, you better dig in, eh? Better dig some trenches. Okay. So we dig a trench about this deep. We thought, this is fine, man. And we were still standing around, of course. And suddenly, all hell broke loose. They had spotted an MPLA or a Cuban patrol coming, so our 81 more mortars fired. Now, inquisitive gunner, we all stood watching this mortars being fired, and just got a thing in my throat, man. I need a little something to suck on. But anyway, the next thing is they were picked up by radar, and the mortars and rockets were on our side. We just took no chance. But boy, did we dig a trench. It was like, and we were like not 6 foot, but we were at least 5 foot. But it was open at the top. And we sat that the 10th of December, we picked up fire at say about 10 o'clock in the morning, and we sat in those trenches. And boy, they were shooting at us. It was accurate. It was hitting us. One red eye actually fell in our gun sight, landed right next to the control panel, the control van. And funnily again, I always see the humor in it. We had an Englishman on our side. Shame he's also passed on, old Joe Ings. Tall guy. But he couldn't put his head under the ground. He always had to keep his head out. And he was sitting there like, watching all of this happening. And he said, he just turned around and said, the lieutenant and them are dead. Because it fell right on top of them. Lo and behold, they were okay. And we sat there for which felt like an eternity. But it was interesting. The true artillery guy that I am, we could hear the fourth field projectiles going over us in the air, and you hear them going. And then in artillery, we call it the ram, is when you ram the projectile into the breech, the gun, and it's got to go boom, then you got a good ram. Then the copper ring on the side of the round is into the rifling of the barrel, and you could actually hear a bad ram because it went over and you heard choo 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 choo, and we were still joking and say, that's a bad ram, and I remember us saying, go boys, go, shoot them, go, because I think we were desperate, but you're sitting there. And they only told us later that they didn't want to give away that they had the medium guns right there. So now we deployed our guns, and normally you've got about 10 or 12 rounds lying on the ground ready to be shot. Now in Potch, when we got Dulfir, and it was 3 rounds, we were like really excited. And I kid you not, the order comes through. 100 rounds of direct fire. 100 rounds. We said, oh God, we haven't got 100 rounds. So basically, we then started shooting. But again, the hierarchy and the discipline of artillery was totally taken away because there wasn't time to shoot in, because in artillery, one gun fires a round. It falls, the OP then correlates if he's 100 meters over or to the left, they then correct it, give the radio signal back, a new bearing gets put onto the gun, and you shoot another round in. Now, normally it's 3, the norm is 5 rounds, then you let go. There wasn't time for that, because bear in mind, these red eyes would be coming in. And the first, I would say, 2 to 3 hours of this battle, the scenario went like this. You would load the gun, and then you run to your trench, and you sit, and the bombs fall, and they fall all around you now, because they knew, before we knew, they knew there was something there. Then the order came, neem pos, and we would sprint to the gun. The number 2, which had to fire the gun, he was at the mouth of the gun. He was the last to go into the trench because he was the first out. He would run to the gun, pull the shot off. The rest of us would come out, me on the sights would come in, re-aim the gun. The other guys would load the gun, and we'd run back to the trench, because then the next wave of shots came in. It was beyond frightening. It was, I can only explain it of memory of sitting in that hole, knowing I could die any second. Now that does something to you. I don't care who you are. If you don't discover your maker there, there's no hope. I could feel God's hands going over me and my friends there. Sorry, I'm getting it. But it was real. We sat there, and what goes through your mind, I remember sitting there in the mud, because it's all muddy, making little signs in the trench hole sides, and then waiting. And the one time, the explosions were still happening around us, and the order came to man the gun, and I started panicking a bit. And I remember shouting, "They want to kill us today." And as I ran towards the gun, not 100 meters, right in line with where I was running, this red eye exploded. And I remember running and looking at it, and the shrapnel just, going all over the place. And yes, I mean, that does something to a 19-year-old. I don't care who you are. It's just, it depends on, it either breaks you or makes you for the rest of your life. And of course, I sat there, and in that running to the gun, I decided I want to live. I've got too much to do in life to die here. Now, my back's to the wall now. So that went on for till around about 4:30. Now, in this time, we had roughly 50 projectiles on the truck. You know that you get ground burst, you get air burst, you get smoke bombs. That we were, just to have a projectile in the air, we'd shoot smoke with smoke projectiles just to get something on the ground, because the firepower that we were up against was tremendous. We then, at sort of about 4:30 that afternoon, things just suddenly, it's like someone switched the lights off, and it was quiet. And I remember the lieutenant who was the OP was told us, "All right, now, relax, boys, the war's over now for today." And it was like on both sides. Now we had to make supper, we can't fight while we have to have supper, but anyway. So we were adamant among ourselves that we have to move positions, because they knew where we were. And the major, who was was Major Blau, was overall he came and spoke to us. He gave us a bit of a pep talk, and then he explained to us why we shouldn't move. But we disagreed with him, but we felt it's all right. It was quite a safe position we were in. We were semi-protected. But that was the last time we saw him. He just never pitched up again. The other funny thing is we had one a staff sergeant, which was a permanent force guy. He sat in his trench, he didn't move his head out. And then, lo and behold, the next morning he says, right, empty your fire buckets, fill the fire buckets with water. I'm going to go and fetch water. And off he went with the water car. Now, in artillery, you've got to clean the barrel after each round with water, or else when you put the charge in, it could explode. So we had a couple of water jugs around us. And among all of this, he would disappear. And then late in the afternoon, he'd come. And what a geel gat jakkels. You know, there's no other word of describing this guy. He just had no guts. We were there youngsters. I think the oldest guy was 22, and no leadership. There was nothing. There was just us 30 guys there. And by that time, the mortars had moved position. So we were there. You know, there was no help or nothing. So anyway, we just stuck it out there. Bear in mind, we had no canvas or no tents to sleep in. And the funny thing about that Angola war, it was never more than 100 meters off the tar road because of the constant rain and the muds. Thank God we had Magirus trucks with a powerful winch, and our winch worked because some of them didn't work. And I bear in mind, this truck's about 30 years old. But the winches, because, you know, we had to winch everything out. To get back to the ammo, you know, we had 50 rounds that they brought in 2 ammo trucks to the brim, these big man trucks full of rounds. That 4 guys were operating the gun. Now on a 5.5, you 10 guys. The rest of the guys were running with ammo with 290 projectiles on your shoulder, and you just flip them down and you run back. Then at one stage, those trucks didn't even move out of our gun sight. They were parked inside the gun, in the gun pit, which was like a no-no. If old Monty Montgomery in the Second World War saw this, he would have executed every single officer right there, because it's a fundamental breach of artillery rule. You just don't do things like that. But we had no choice, because we were just firing so much rounds that we just couldn't keep up. Then the other thing was, now you're preparing 30 HE rounds, which is a ground burst round. So the ammo guys are sitting there putting in these fuses, and airburst. Then suddenly now we have to take all these fuses out and put airburst in. Now airburst, as it leaves a projectile, it flies, and 30 meters before the ground, it sends out a signal. And this signal, 30 meters above the ground, bounces back and explodes. Absolutely devastating. We were shooting ground bursts, projectiles, probably for an hour solid. Now, in artillery terms, rapid fire, they say 3 rounds a minute is the norm. Lo and behold, at times, at the distance we were shooting, we had 5 to 6 projectiles in the air at any given time. Do the calculations, 3 guns, the devastation on the other side. At some points, the 3 guns were shooting at 3 different targets at the same time. Now, hats off to that lieutenant and our hero sitting there under the rock, because every single Cuban was looking for him. That communication, the hierarchy of artillery just fell flat, because that was that lieutenant talking to this lieutenant, talking to me on the gun sight. That 2 rounds and we were on target, because this is how good these guys were. I'm led to believe he also got awarded a Norris Crooks, the lieutenant, for absolute bravery, sitting up on that mountain right underneath the Cubans and directing fire. That was the first night, the 10th of December 1975. I got my papers that day. To give my old Bombardier van Zyl, bless his soul, wherever he is in the world, he understood I was struggling with this sights in the beginning. And he helped me out for like the first 10 minutes of that. And then he said, "No, come on, you got to learn. You got to get it. You can do it." And I've got the confidence to accurately aim that gun. One problem I had was, now, in artillery, you always get an aiming point. And you set your gun sight on the bearing, which is a sliding scale. So you put it on, say, 280 degrees, and you line up with your aiming post. So as you turn the gun, you always get to the right, to your aiming post. Because there was so much chaos going on and guys running up and down, you put out little poles. If you can't get a tree or a clear aiming point, you use poles. So you line up the 2 little palkies, and then you know you're on target. So I said to this guy, my number one, Al, I can't see with all the smoke and the going on and the noise. I battled to find my aiming points. So I found a big piece of polystyrene this size. And I said, I'm going to put it up on the mountain. So man alone, and I throttle up the mountain. And I looked down on this gun sight, and it was quite, we're all right. And with rope, I tied this big white polystyrene thing on the mountain. So then I could look past this, because in my mind, I explained the 2 guns, 1 in the middle and 2 behind. Now, my sight I was always in the way of this the middle gun. So then I could aim right over the back towards the mountain, and that helped tremendously for me to accurately. By this time, the gun had moved into the sand solidly. Now, anybody that's seen a medium gun fire, when you're shooting at maximum velocity and that shot goes off, the wheels jump in the air, probably just about, and then the gun comes down, and the legs hold it in position. But then you got to aim, and you got to jump over the fight leg, which is the leg that goes out. Now, after about half an hour of fighting, because I'm not lying to you, I would stand and aim and just lean back. And then the number 3 had to, when the guy puts the percussion cap in that triggers the charge, to show that you're ready, you hit it close, because they leave the door open, and when you hit it, the number 1 shouts fire, and then the number 2 pulls the rope and off she goes. Then I just leaned back like that and aimed and went like that. I never even jumped over, because the gun was so solid. It would just lift like that as the shot went off. Now we're shooting 22 kilometers away. Alan was lekker. When you're a good artillery guy, yes, there's no lekker thing, no better feeling than that. Eh? And the other thing that comes to mind was the bloody poor Unitas. You know, I just shook my head that these guys were in the middle of a war. As you can see from this photo, they're standing there barefoot. We took some of their rifles. It was so dirty, you couldn't see through the front of the barrel. And they now are our infantry. So in the morning, they would load them onto these trucks and drive them to the front. And we would start firing. And like, not 15 minutes later, they would be coming running through the bush like wild men, just running back away from this. And I remember the officer commanding was a thin black guy, but he was like, and he had a sjambok. And he would physically lay them down in the road and sjambok them and load them back on the truck and ship them back to the front. It was like, you know, no movie. You can't even produce it in a movie, man. I mean, it was just like, and now these are the guys that were supposed to protect us. You know, they were our infantry, because in the warfare you got your infantry, then you get your panzers, then you get your infantry, then you get your artillery. No, it was the artillery, infantry, panzers. You know, because the guys were in lorry cars. They just took no chance. Although they were very brave people in those cars. Those panzer guys, they did fantastic work. They were the first ones to go over the bridge. What had happened the next day, because of the firing, now we're talking 11th of December, 75, the sappers came in and they had to repair the bridge so that we could move over. What we didn't know was that the Cubans had taken such a hiding that day, and this comes from their documentation, that they had decided to withdraw and go around the flank towards Ebo. But their commander went ahead and he detonated a landmine and he was taken out. So it was like total chaos. He was dead. So he couldn't go back and tell his guys to leave or whatever. So they were actually headless. And that contributed to the outcome of the battle. The 11th of December started at about 7 o'clock in the morning. We had to give cover fire for the sappers that went in to repair the bridge. Now, bear in mind, from the photo you'll see later, there was no modern bridge building equipment. These guys had to chop down trees. They had to hand carry on their shoulder the tree trunks and build a bridge, which a couple of them got Tenor's crooks for, because it was utter bravery that those guys were working under, because they were under constant fire. They were our projectiles coming in there, and it was like chaos. But they built, they repaired, it took them, I think, 2 days, and they built the bridge. Now, from the photo, you can see it. They built probably a flippin' good bridge with what they had. So we were giving them support. And I would say the second day of the battle was probably the most intense, because I remember looking at my barrel and it was white hot, probably 1.5 meters, this thing, because of the rate of fire. And our gun, we had the logbook. It was actually in the Battle of El Alamein. It was in the logbook. And if you look down the barrel, just after, in the beginning of the battle, there was a bloody hole sitting there, you know. So booty. But so the gun, you know, it was like really old stuff, you know. That was the best we had. But that was the only way. We were sitting right in the death zone to reach the red eye rocket launchers that they had. Now, those things were devastating, because you could hear that screeching sound of it incoming, and then it's not like an artillery piece when it explodes. Go, it had a weird screeching sound when it exploded. And so we got under fire. Well, this Yassi, unbelievable. And about, I would say, say 12 o'clock. About we were, my bloody gun, my sight breaks on the gun. So they radio in, they send the tiffy in to come fix this thing, you know. What happens? The little Felica, go and wait for him at the road. Oh, God. I take my little Sten gun and I'll troll down there. It's about 100 meters to the tar road. And it's a narrow little tar road. And I remember there's a little stream running next to the road in a little ditch, you know, and the water was flowing down there. By that time, I'd found myself a camo jacket lying around, which I just wore. It was filthy, but I mean, by that time we hadn't washed for 2 weeks, so it didn't matter, you know. And I had like a little Cuban, little hat, camouflage hat with flaps at the back, and with the green and my tackies and my toes sticking out. A lot of the guys, the first day, because of the heat, in their wisdom, cut the sleeves off. Yes, but at night the mosquitoes came. And then, yes, they were praying for their bloody sleeves, but it was too late. So anyway, now I'm sitting there next to the road waiting for the Gary to come down the road. And I look like it and I see, here comes a patrol on the tar side of the road. A couple of UNITA guys coming along the road now. I'm thinking to myself now, this white South African, are they going to be friendly? Are they going to get a fright and start shooting when they see someone in the bushes there? Or I think I'm going to take the safe way out. I'm going to lie flat. So I laid flat in that water, now facing them. So in case I can jump up and scream Viva UNITA, you know, because everything was Viva UNITA. On the side of the gun was Viva UNITA. On the side of the gun tractor, we painted Viva Savimbi. And the little Nori car, armored cars were like totally painted full of Savimbi and UNITA. So I'm lying there, and these guys come throttling on. And they're now about, say, 150 meters from me. Yes, and a red eye comes and it lands right on the side of the road. About, say, very close to them. Yes, but they scatter. And I've got the picture of that hole it made in the tar road. As you can see there, I was taken back the photograph, so towards the neck. But it gives you a fantastic view of what the little road was and where the ditch was. So needless to say, they come out the bush, they walk right straight past me. They never saw me, but I was just too relieved because, you know, you never know what could happen. But it was such a, it was funny, but it wasn't funny because I was sitting there and the bombs and the red eyes were falling and everything. Lo and behold, the Gary comes, so they fixed my gun. So I was back in the battle. But I must say, it wasn't a nice experience sitting there knowing I've got no trench here, because by this time we'd built manure trenches, you know, because of all the ammo cases. So, you know, there's a solid steel boxes. We laid them on the top of the roof and we filled that with sand, and we still put sandbags on top of that. So one thing is they would not get us out. Even with airburst, they would not have got to us sitting in those trenches. So that was sort of the main thing that sort of gave us hope, is that at least we felt safe. Again, I must say, nobody with rank near us. So the second day went off you know, it was really intensive. I can only feel for those Cubans. They can say what they want to. I can testify. It wasn't fun. They got hammered. We shot the living shits out of them. There's no other way of describing it. I mean, if you do the calculation, you know, we shot an ammo truck empty in an hour. And the guys would fill in new ammunition, and it just went on and on and on. So at about, say, 4:30, suddenly, boop, the light goes off. All right, guys, that's it. You know, okay. Whew. And then something strange happened. We suddenly saw, and I remember I was standing on top of this vault, you know, the wall of the thing. And suddenly 2 or 3 civilians walked in with video cameras, you know, in the old days, it's not these little modern hand cam things. That was a heavy with reels and everything. And till today, I say those were the CIA guys that was there, and they actually filmed us. I would love to see that footage because it's just never surfaced anywhere. But I am convinced that it was because they spoke with an American accent and they were talking to us, and it can only have been that director of the CIA that was later executed that was there. And it was in our gun sight. So, yeah, that was eventful. Then the 12th of December was the third day, the decisive day. We started firing early in the morning, and we started getting feedback that we had a direct hit on their mortar sites, and the firing stopped immediately. The red eye went quiet, and I would say around about 12 o'clock, it was all over. We then started, the guys were then moving in, and what we subsequently discovered was that our Panzer guys with the noddy cars went over the bridge and really took charge of the situation and cleared out. We were still then after the battle there for about, well, I would say another week we were spending there, and they were taking the guys to the front. And then as these weapons were captured, and I'll never forget the famous photo, you could actually see me standing with my back looking at this, and the barrels of the rocket launchers were still elevated with the projectile that went, shrapnel that went right through it, through the one barrel in the middle, and through the rocket that was still inside it. So we stood there, and from the photo you could see, and it sums it up beautifully. I'm standing there. Next to me is Al Slabbert in his underpants with his tackies on. And it just sums up, that was how we fought. And in other photos, you can see the shirts were off. There was no uniform. We all had these staldokker on, but, you know, our shirts, because, oh, yeah, it's tropical, the weather. The 3 guns, hopefully somebody will, I can't recall the third gun's name. We were the Rocket Busters. And somehow we found a cokie pen. And because I could draw, I drew a rocket on each gun, and we were the Rocket Busters. The English guys were bad company. They were quite a good guys, you know, and very close-knit. And I would say, if we had to weigh up the performance, they were probably the unit that gelled together the most and were probably the best gun crew on the thing. Because you understand there's competition, eh? The guys, you know, you can't be better than that, or they can't have more than you. And so to get back to more to the little bit of the human aspect of what happened there while we were still there, the army in their wisdom decided not to send us any food. So we ran out of food. There was no rat packs. Because the Portuguese shame, you know that at the beginning of that war, there was roughly 500,000 Portuguese in Angola. Before the 11th of November, when independence were called or given to by the Portuguese, they'd managed to get about 250,000 out. So there was still 250,000 Portuguese that were caught up in this war. They virtually abandoned everything. They left with what they could fit in their cars, and they moved south. Later on, we would meet up with these convoys of the refugees. And so you must understand that the farmhouse was there with all its furniture, all its cattle, all its chickens. So what we did, every guy had a chicken, you know, and the chickens were running around the gun site there, and, you know, and at night the cows would come and the guys would milk the cows and the cows would go back into the field. And just as you crossed the bridge and you on the Cuban side, there was a herd of cattle that was caught in this crossfire. And they were all wiped out. They were lying there. Didn't she say 100 cows were lying there? Dead. And we had got into this one house a bag of mealie meal. And so we had maize, you know, we ate. And there was pineapples, the biggest pineapples I've seen. I mean, a pineapple this size. And you can actually see the guys sitting eating their pineapples. And that's what we lived on. Now, a lot of the guys I spoke to till today can't face pineapples. But yes, they were lekker. They were nice. So that's, and then what they would, then they started bringing us 4 packets of cigarettes and a Coke or a Fanta, each guy. Now me, I don't smoke. So the guys that smoked, yes, I bartered, eh? I think it was 6 cold drinks for a packet of cigarettes. So I made good business, you know, because I didn't smoke. Then the guys found Cuban cigarettes and cigars. And I actually smuggled a packet back. I still got it in my drawer, of a packet of Fasant cigarettes, Cuban cigarettes, and the cigars. And on the group photo we'll discuss later, you can see the guys, each one got a cigar in their mouth. Now, bless 2 people's souls. The one is Lori Shakat, a Jewish guy, and the other one is Alfan Broderick, because they had the guts to smuggle a camera in. I think Fan had 2 rolls of photos. You know, it's not digital. We still in the old days, you know, we had to muck and druk, you know. And if it wasn't for those guys, that war would never have been covered, or because they talk about it, the Operation Savannah has been the forgotten war, because everybody in power, the politicians wanted to forget about it. The army got blood nose because of their conduct. So we were never recognized. They were never spoken about. It was one of those things that they never accepted what really happened there. But you know, say I'll get to that a little bit later, because I got documented proof of this, that the army was a wake-up call for them, because they realized their equipment was outdated. Their method of applying their discipline was out. And I think in one of the documents that I found was the official report from Colonel Kreis, who was in charge of Operation Savannah, where he openly said that the morale amongst the national servicemen and of junior officers up until the rank of captain was superb. But from above, from major upwards, the morale was shocking. And he used the term in his report that maybe they missed home. Bloody hell, didn't I miss home, you know? But it was just, it was actually, and I don't want to harp on it too much, but it was a disgrace what had happened there, because they all sat drinking and cutting on in Sela and all these places. But from where I stood on the ground, there was no leadership. Maybe there was in the way they had operated and planned the war, but it was, if it wasn't for the protection of our Father in heaven, and I would say we were so lucky that we never got wiped out there, because the disorganization, the lack of supply lines, the protection, the fundamentals of war was chucked out the door. And Colonel Kreis actually says that in his report, that the Israeli army had the same thing going in the 7-day war, where the battles, the pressures of battles were so intense that conventional hierarchy and command structures just was non-existent. And I think the lesson that was out of that Angola operation was that they had to wake up. And I think what happened after that is that it was truly amazing that the South African Defence Force probably turned out to be one of the best in the world. And I'll tell you, it is the price and the lessons going back to that chaos that I was exposed to, that your logistics is so important in war. Touch wood, we never ran out of ammo. That was the saving grace. But we ran out of everything else. And it was quite interesting afterwards what had happened. We sort of then relaxed, and we were now very chuffed that we gave these Cubans a clap, you know. And but then politically the tide had already turned, because in November the Clark resolution came out that South Africa wasn't allowed, or it was frowned upon, and the pressures were building up on the government. Even before the final day, I think 2 days before the start of Bridge 14, the order had already come for South Africa to withdraw. But and Colonel Kreis in his report also says that the flow of paperwork back to HQ just non-existent. They didn't know in headquarters in Pretoria who was in Angola, who wasn't. The nameless. He said the frustrating thing for him was that he gave the orders so many times to do the paperwork, but the paperwork never arrived. And till today, there's guys that are fighting for recognition of what had happened there.
You know, I'm actually a lucky man, because one of the perks of this creation of Us Legacy conversation is I meet people like you. Really, I meet the most fantastic people. They tell the most fantastic stories which you will not find in the history books. So I have to ask you here, there were a few books written about Bridge 14 and Savannah in the overall, which was a major operation for a country totally unprepared for war. And there's a lot of people who say, politically speaking, this was done against the wishes of a prime minister. In fact, that was P.W. Botha and the army who decided, the top guys, to rush into Angola unprepared. And then, of course, they had to come back undefeated, yes, but from that came the 1976 Soweto riots, because the idea came into being that the army was defeated, and the myth of never being defeated before was created, even though it wasn't true. Perhaps I'm putting it wrongly here, but I think people understand what I mean. So I have to ask you here, Ferdie, did anybody ever spoke to you or your mates, as far as you know, to write a book about it, or to mention your stories inside the book, which is already written?
That's what we try to achieve. But a lot of guys, a lot of the senior officers have written books, but it was never the guys on the ground. It was always what happened in their ivory towers, which was never a reflection. So a guy was a guy in Gordon's Bay was one of the sappers, and he wanted to write the book. And he did fantastic work. I mean, he got in charge. He even got in touch with the Russian commander that was in charge of the whole war in Angola on Savannah. And they had a chat. The guy, he gave his impressions. The Cubans, he got hold of the Cubans, and their stories came out. So there was this book going to be written. Unfortunately, he had health problems, and the manuscripts and all the documents that he had collected was handed over to a couple of guys. That Laurie Schachert is involved, I know. Why I know is because we had a little reunion, the three of us, where we had a little, that was the first time I spoke to, in all the years, this was about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, that I spoke to somebody about the war, because I had to carry it in myself. If I tell this story that I'm now sharing with you to my friends, they look at me as I was smoking something, man. I couldn't tell it to my family because I heard it, but it never ran home. So it was like, it happened and you live with it. Personally, it affected me. The 10th of December affected me for about 5-6 years, where I went into a bit of a depression. But then I remember my promise running to my gun that day, that, boy, I want to live. I ain't going to let this spoil my life. And I must say that it has been my anchoring life, was those experiences. And so, yes, the book, all the documentation is there. It must just be now put into writing. I gave a little bit of speech, but you know, I must say, I was just a little gunner there. I mean, I was a nobody. In the bigger scheme of things, I'm still a nobody in terms of that war. I was just one of 30 guys. The only claim to fame that I was the number 3, which is quite a lekker job in artillery, because you know you get to sit at the window in the gun tractor. You got a little bit of perks, you know, but otherwise, you know, we were just youngsters fighting for our lives, and being thrown in the deep end, and we had to swim. And boy, we swam. You know, I'm very proud of what we've achieved there, because no matter, I read all the documentation, and I must say, I've not come across any, even the correspondence from the Cuban side, they admitted they got clubbed. The one guy wrote such a surreal version, because I know what I know, and reading his version, the certain factors all came to piece, and it made me convince he was there. And he was talking also about sitting in that trench in that total fear. And the one thing he mentioned is the accuracy and that rate of fire that they were subjected to. It was hell on earth, Chris. No matter what line, from a human point of view, those guys were in hell. We went over the, about 3 or 4 days later, after the battle ended, I got a chance to go and look, because they took us over the bridge to go and see. So at least I can say I've seen the bridge. And the first thing, when you were like, say, 200-300 meters over the bridge, the smell of death, bodies lying there, because there wasn't anybody extracting the bodies. There was none of that, man. The cows, you can imagine swollen up cows lying there, say 100 of them, the smell. And then we got to that mortar position and looking into the trench and seeing that gemors. We had to cover it up. We buried those guys there. It was sad, but we tried to do it with respect. And and then it hits home. This is for real. And the poor souls that lost their lives there, for what? At the end of the day, communism, imperial powers, what the hell? Apartheid. You look back after 40 years, it was actually for nothing. Nobody won anything. We fought our hearts out just to get the order to move back. And we came back with our tails. And the saddest thing of all was, we got to Grootfontein. And here we were parade. We were war veterans. We macho men. And the Soweto riot starts. And we listen to this and we say, yes, let's go and pluck some of these oaks, We must subdue them. And what people don't realize how close the army was in sending these guys in there. But it never happened. And thank God it never happened. But that was really a tough one, a bitter pill to swallow, because we had gone in voluntary to fight for South Africa. We fought. The guys died. We came back. To sit with this and you think, you're ungrateful. But, but we were so indoctrinated that we didn't see what it actually, from a black point of view, the injustices. We just wanted to, clap them again, But we had to live with it. And we had to, so from that point, my progression to the New South Africa, BEE, yes, man, it's been quite a journey. I think my lifetime, just a little story, we had our 40th matric reunion. And I first didn't want to go because I hated school, And then I thought to myself, no, I actually want to go. So me and the wife, we flew up to Blackburn and we went to the school, and I walked in, I looked at all these old guys and I thought, yeah, girls, I didn't recognize them, they aged. But I suppose they couldn't place me either, But the thing was that we had a little dinner, and then the head boy spoke. Henry Geldenhuys. Professor Dr. Henry Geldenhuys. He now works for Eskom, or he worked for Eskom at that time, and he was a world leader. He became a world leader in lightning and surge protection. So it was quite interesting talking to him, because I had a little bit of background myself. Our deputy, and he made a little speech. And then the deputy head boy, Ferdie van Niekerk, no relation. I met him. I was studying through UNISA and project management, and I bumped into him. So he was also doing it. And he was the representative of the European Union in South Africa. So he's not your average little monkey, you know. But he stood up and he gave the most fundamental speech I heard in my life. He started off by saying what had happened to the world since we left Matric in 1974. There was no computers. There was no internet. And he went through how the world had changed. And we were flabbergasted. Because if you think about from 1974, what had happened to the world to now. And then the second part of the thing, he spoke about the next generation of micro technology. And what are we seeing with COVID? A lot of people are saying it's a conspiracy, but it's a manipulation of medicine and human, I think, my opinion. But he spoke about it, and he said how the world is going to change and how governments are going to change and how unimportant governments are going to become. And it was really fascinating to hear that, and all in my lifetime. So, God, I'm blessed.
You know, people say to me that legacy conversations that we record history, but what they forget is that the people who made the history, people like you and that class of yours of 74. And that's why I thank everyone who is listening here, and I thank everybody who comes here. Because these type of stories has to come out. If there were negatives, we have to talk about it. We have to do the same which I suppose the German army did after the defeat of 1918. From that came their panzer warfare. Now we can argue history, but that came out of it. From Breach 14 and Savannah, the South African army rapidly changed. They modernized, they got people in like Roland de Vries. They've got the top officers, the command things were sorted out. You guys, you know, you remind me of the First World War, when Britain had a very, very small professional army. And they were called the Old Contemptibles. I don't know if you know because I believe it was the German Kaiser, Wilhelm II, who spoke about them as a contemptible little army. And then, of course, one of the first skirmishes, they ran into this contemptible little army. And I don't like the Brits. Let me say that I have the Afrikaner tradition about it, but it's all in good spirits. Look, it's not serious. But they learned the tricks of a trade in the Boer War before that, where they realized they had to use concealment and they better up their musketry to be good shooters. And they were so good that the Germans running into them actually thought they were running into machine guns, and they were not. These guys were just shooting the hell out of it. So every time you look at history, you see the same patterns. You see something bad, and from that, hopefully people will learn. And that's the lesson for me from Breach 14. All the bravery, all the problems, from that came another phase, and it went on, and from that we could create the miracle, which is the new South Africa. Now, I don't want to talk about what happened further, but I would say that to you. It was a damn miracle. Because nobody thought that the South Africans, the Afrikaner, my tribe, your tribe, will vote twice and say, let us end this, let us apologize in public, let us humble ourselves, let us say we were wrong, and let us give these guys a fair chance. We did that. And it didn't happen through a barrel of a gun. I don't care who says what. If you want to see what happens through a barrel of a gun, go and look what happened when the Americans ran away with NATO from Afghanistan just 2-3 months ago. That's what happens when a barrel of a gun wins. There were no such things in South Africa. It was a peaceful transition. Yes, there were a few of the right-wing idiots who were doing their nonsense, but they got controlled. The police and the army handed over a working country to the new government. Whatever they did with it afterwards ain't my problem. I'm not going to even talk about that because then this channel will be closed down immediately. So I wish to thank you, and I want to say to people here, if anyone knows where that videos are, which was shot by the CIA or whoever they were, please send them to us or tell us where they are. If you guys need help with your book, let us see if we can help you. And if any of those groups, including the Cubans and the Russians, wants to come on this show and talk to us, you are welcome. There's a standing invitation. You can ask people like Ferdie here. It's not hard. You write an email to me. I normally respond. We talk. And then I get you back. And then we start talking like today. And I thank God for whoever had the mute button invented on Zoom. Because right in the beginning, I was laughing so much that I almost fell off my chair here. It was that funny. And it reminded me of something which happened in the police college when you were talking about the marathon running. We also had in the police college, I don't know why, the army and the police had this thing about sport. And in the first place, you had to win whatever you do. Even if it's darts, if boxing, it doesn't matter, you win. But if you will not win, well, as I say in my books, God will not have mercy on you, neither will the sergeant or the corporal. You will regret losing. And that's not a bad attitude. And so every Wednesday, we had like a sport day. Now, I was clever, you know, so I said, I'll play golf. And then we would get out, play 9 holes, and then they'll sit in the bar and, you know, speak to the uncles there, and they feel sorry for us, you know, being, you know, away from home and buy us a few drinks and think, no, that was great. But one guy decided, a whole bunch of them decided they are going to do bicycle riding, cyclist. And man, I stood watching them and they arrived with chopper bikes. Now, I don't know who can remember it, but that's not a racing bike. I mean, that's like, and a few of them arrived, which obviously they stole or dominated their little brothers' bikes, you know, because the saddle is this high above. And that went well for them because they would drive out of the police college gates and there were these, on the left-hand side, it's probably still there, was like this Portuguese shop, but it may be Greek, I don't know. But we call it Koskokerot. But they had the nicest slop chips and things you can imagine. And I just want to say, the first words my wife Rebecca learned in Afrikaans probably was slop chips, because that's my favorite food of all time. Of course, I'm banned from eating it, but slop chips in a Russian, that used to be.
Well, take 5.
Yeah,
take 5.
Absolutely, my man. It's the best. And then she realized, of course, also that slop can be translated to English as slap, you know. So that's another story. So they would drive out with their bicycles and their choppers and their things just about there to Koskokerot, and then they park there and they, you know, eat their slop chips and they come back. And then one day, one of the lance sergeants arrived. It is like the police version for the corporals. And this fellow was a Springbok cyclist. Now, I don't know what was his name, Erkies or Ballas from Sail or something, I don't know. But this fellow, he said he'll take them for a ride. And they went up all the way to Pretoria North. Then they went to Hammanskraal. Then they went, I mean, he came back more than about 80 kilos or something they cycled that day. And the next week, there were only 5 or 6 of them left. So, on a lighter note, what happened afterwards? I mean, you became a successful businessman afterwards. Can you tell us about that, your family? I've met your son here, wonderful chap. We're interested in the human side of things as well here.
Yeah, going back to my dream of becoming a motor mechanic, you know, is that I never did my trade anyway, but I landed up in the freight business, and my first job was when a parcel came in and I had to go to customs, and it was a weird thing. They don't know what it is because the customs guys, I only want to charge the duty. Then they would stop the shipment, and then my job was to open up the parcel, see what's inside, seal it up again, and anyway, and then then you take it through the process of getting it released. And I worked at Jan Smuts Airport, and we soon realized that what was happening. The film board, every movie, every picture that came into the country had to be screened before it was released. And every lunchtime, when you see all the customs officers running to the warehouse, you know that something came in that was below the belt. So I then went to the army and came back, and you know, what do you do now, you know? So I thought I quite enjoyed it, and I went back in that, and I had to resign. A lot of guys got paid while they were in the year. I lived off the 25 rand a month, you know, and which I still had to pay canteen fees and I don't know what else. But we survived, eh? I think a Coke was 10 cents or something, you know. And I went back, and then I met a guy. He worked, and it was at the start, the beginning of South Africa reinvesting in the telecommunications business by that time. It was South African Post Office was still in charge of telecommunications, and the Altec group was formed by Dr. Belventa, and he had this factory in Boksburg called Standard Telephones and Cables. And Rennie's, who I worked for at that time, had the contract of importing all the stuff. So they had an on-site office. So Jan Spal, bless his soul, he said, no, I must come work for him there. So then that was nice near my house. I could park my motorbike inside the factory, right outside the door. And, you know, so I worked there, and then I eventually went up the ladder, moved to the airport, and I was then what they called an entry clerk, which is you basically do the declarations, and it was handwritten. Yes, I had ilta, I don't know what you call it, on my fingers from writing, because you had to write through 7 copies of documentation that this is a electrical part solely and purely for electrical purposes, for amperages between 15 and 220 volts, you know, long sentences, and then write it down. And anyway, I did that for a couple of years, and by that time, I think I was probably married. I met my wife, by the way, through an army Jippo camp, you know. But anyway, they built at the factory. South Africa was spending heavily on local, because there were sanctions. So they were spending on local production, local development. And old Dr. Venter decided to build an autoclave, which is a high pressure chamber in the ground, which they grow quartz crystals from. Now, a crystal gets cut, and that's how you get a frequency in a radio, because the oscillation of the crystal determines the frequency. So they had got this plant in from Israel, and the Minister of Post and Telecommunication was going to come and open this plant, say on the Wednesday. So the Monday, they fly in a working model of this thing. So I get the phone call, and they say, listen, I don't care what you do, but we need that model at the opening. So I do the paperwork, and if you wanted a special clearance, you had to go to like the main man of the customs, and he'll jippo the process and give you a release. So I don't know if it was my face or whatever, but I went in there very humbly, you know, because like now you're talking to God, you know, you're meneer, please, you know. So meneer, I tell him the whole story. I really need this. So the bastard looks at me like this, and pulls out his drawer, and they had a big stamp they put on stop, you know. So he stops it. So it's like you're putting a poke in me. I say, you bastard. I turned around and walked out. And I was thinking, now I'm screwed, because, I mean, there's no ways. Now it's got to go from the States warehouse to another facility. That's another week. So I thought, all right. I turned around and I went to the controller of customs. Now that is like the top main man on the airport. So I asked to see him. He says, yeah, what's a change? But now that's now I'm a youngster, you know. So I tell him the story. So he says to me, he gets on the phone, he phones this, he says, come see me. So as this guy comes in the door and he sees me, I could see that hate in his eyes. I thought, that's the end of my career. So the controller of customs overruled him and unreleased the thing. And I walked out, but I knew I was screwed. I would never, ever, I wouldn't be able to walk past this guy, because that's the way it worked in those days. Maybe today still. So anyway, I phoned up Altec and I told him, listen, you're going to get your autoclave, got the release, send the parcel. And I said, and by the way, I forfeit my career for you for this. He says, what do you mean? I said, I've just stepped over the line for me personally, Ferdie van Niekerk. I'm screwed. My career is over. He says, don't worry, we'll look after you. No, needless to say. Lo and behold, a week later, yes, I've got a cushy job in Altec, eh? They organized. So I was very grateful, which took me out of the freight business into an electronics environment. I was then like the purchasing guy over the stores, but years, I was like a collar and tires and manier, you know. And that happened, and then I became a salesman, and I did well. And at the time, my boss, Ferdie Pinar, we still mates still today. He had the habit of saying when he wanted to talk, let's go for a drive. So he said, come, we're going for a drive. So in the car, and I said, oh, what's up? He says, we're leaving. So I said, well, what do you mean we're leaving? He said, no, I got a job offer at Plessis, which is a competition, and you're going with. So I said, lekker, we're going, you know. Not knowing that we've got constraint of trade, you know. So anybody, your background, you know, constraint of trade is the guys laugh at it, but you mustn't laugh at those things, eh? So anyway, off we go to Plessis, and we probably took about 70% of the business with us. The next thing, there we go. We nailed the constraint of trade. So there I landed up in the Supreme Court of Joburg, sitting with my boss for doing my job, learning what the legal system's like. And what shocked me about the legal system is that they get up and they give all the affidavits in. Yes, and you're sitting there and the guy's lying. You know for a fact he's lying, but you can't say nothing. So he said, oh, don't worry, our lawyer will sort him out, you know. So our lawyer gets up, he puts his case ahead, and we think, lekker. No. They get a chance to rebut on what we've said. So the guy now stands up and he nullifies it. Needless to say, we lose the case. That means for 6 months, we're not allowed to work. We're not allowed to do anything. So yeah, that was my story. So I was working for this company, and then the new South Africa dawned. By that time, I ran the cabling plant division I was in charge of, and we were producing cabling for Telkom that was coming out of our ears. And the Plessis had decided that that's not an ideal BEE deal, because all companies were looking for BEE deals. So they decided to sell this division off. And lo and behold, they appoint an Indian fellow as my boss. And within an hour, I realized I'm going to blitz him this out, because really he had no backbone. He couldn't tell it to your face. He always had to come around the back. So anyway, I stuck that out, but I was desperate to find another job. And eventually I got a little job, which should have been the end of me. But I then went at Telkom in Pretoria. And I'll never forget, we drove past the Pretoria Central Prison. And about halfway up, he was driving. I said to him, listen, I'm resigning. I'm leaving. And the guy nearly rolled the car there. He went off the road, you know, going up that hill towards the monument. He lost the road. He said, "No, you can't do that." I said, "No, I'm doing it. I can't work with you." He said, "No, this company that bought us realized they made a mistake and they want to sell it to me, but only to me." So, all right. So lo and behold, the proceedings started, but they wanted cash. So the director at that time of Plessis was also Van Niekerk, Andre Van Niekerk. He was the groot crocodile, I was the klein crocodile. That was the nicknames, because I had a direct line to this guy, because we clicked from the first day. And as a director of the company, I had free access to his office, and he would drop everything when I walked in. And we would talk for hours. As you can notice, I've got a bit of verbal diarrhea, you know, but I love it. So anyway, he sat me down and he said to me, "Luister, I know you're a gunslinger of note. There's two things that you got to do. And before you leave my office, you're going to agree to it. One, you're going to appoint this guy as your partner, because he's a fantastic financial guy. And I know you slapgat when it comes to numbers and crossing the T's and dotting the I's. It will be the best investment to put your pride in your pocket, embrace the new South Africa, and take this out as your partner." And it was a bitter pill. He says, the second thing is, you don't buy any fancy car, because my passion is cars. You know, I'm sitting on a car collection now, which is quite amazing. And I've had some fantastic motor cars in my life, race cars, unique cars. Anyway, he said to me, "You promised now on the Bible, you will not buy the first sports car or luxury car you'll buy cash." I said, "All right, Andre." Anyway, we bought the business. So first of all, I offered Alsailish Plessis sold 15%. Yes, and it took the guy 2 weeks to convince me now he wants a little bit more. So we did a deal, and the rest is history. We absolutely became a team of note. It's how our relationship soured at the end. But boy, I credit him for everything, because he knew how to turn money and how to work cash. We were sitting, we never had an overdraft. We were self-financing from nothing. We became self-funding. We turned over 150 million in the 1 year. Now, if you understand cash flow, you got to multiply that 150 by 6, because of the timing and the basic cash flow. And we did that, cash. And that was him. So we did well. And I had that contract for that 17, 18 years, which we supplied Telkom Namibia, Telkom Swaziland, all over. We supplied, and everybody in South Africa and Namibia has dealt with me, whether they liked it or not. Because every time you spoke on an old conventional analog telephone, you spoke to me. And I remember the joke, me and the kids and my wife, we would go, and if we walk into a restaurant and we saw our little phone, we'll chuckle, you know, say, that's a geldmakertjie, you know. And even up until today, I go to my local hairdresser and he's still got one of the old phones there, and I sort of chuckle and I laugh, and I don't say much, but I know, you know, somewhere it was my doing. So yeah, that was my career till today. My kids are still involved in the business. I got kicked out officially because my ideas that gel with the new kids, you know, they got, and also the world of digitalized, and today it's a whole different ball game. It is quite scary what is happening in the industry now with the rapid change and the logistics involved in South Africa of staying ahead, because, you know, by the time, I'll give you a good example, we found an agency for a cell phone. It was probably the third largest manufacturer in the world after Apple and Xiaomi. Who's this Chinese brand? I'll get to the name now. That's got in trouble with America. But to get the agency, we had to place an order. You know, so we laid out millions, and I brought in a lot of these phones. They were state of the art. Just by registering them in the retail industry, you know, you've got to go through the process of listing them. And by the time they said, all right, fine, give us the product, they were outdated. There was 2 versions newer. So you as a small guy, it's impossible to compete with these huge companies, because they get allocated like a Samsung. They've got the whole production laid out for the year. January this model, February that model. Their production's lined up for that. So that made it very, very difficult. And, you know, unfortunately in this world today, there isn't space for a middleman anymore. So you either got to be big or small. It's got to be very sharp. And then, yeah, that was me, you know. And can maybe tell you a little bit about my racing days. I was a serious racing driver, but I must admit I got a bit too big to fit into the cars, you know. But I got my carcass into some serious motoring, you know, and it was great fun sitting at huge speeds. I must say, again, I go back to my childhood days. I used to sit and watch the 9 Hour, and old David Piper had this green Ferrari P4. And I remember I was so short, I couldn't look over the fence at Kyalami in Clubhouse Corner. I used to sit, and he'd come through there. And I promised that one day I'm going to do the same. And lo and behold, I managed to get one of those cars. I had Ferraris. Yes, and I tell you, I had tears in my eyes the first time I came around Sunset. And as I came into Clubhouse Corner, I was sobbing inside the car there. But it was a nice feeling, and I achieved it, you know. So yeah, I've had some good fun. And yeah, it was good days, eh?
You know, we have Colonel Frans Fourie on the show as well, one recce commander. And he has this nasty habit of always saying, I'm not going to tell the story now, I'll get to it. And quite a few of the commentary was like, Colonel, we now really want to know. So as I'm sitting here, I cannot let you go, Ferdie, without telling me about meeting your wife on a camp. I suppose you got called up, so please, if she doesn't mind, mevrou, asseblief, we need to hear the story.
What had happened, I did quite a lot of camps. I've got fantastic experiences with 61 Meg, because we went to 61 Meg, and then I did 2 3-month camps as infantry on the northern border of Messina. And then at the game reserve, we were patrolling on the Cecil line there, that they had the electrified fence between Zimbabwe and South Africa. And we were patrolling there, and you were like 5 days in the bush, and then you come back for 2 days in camp, and then you got to still push beat. And I remember I was sitting they had a lovely tree house they built, and we had night vision even nogal, you know. But I mean, at night you could look, and then someone lights a cigarette and you're blind, you know. It was like, wasn't such lekker technology, but we thought it was, because, you know, it was night vision. You know, I remember I was on guard duty that night, and it was so I didn't sleep much. So it was about 10 o'clock in the morning. Flikker, Major, will you see? So marching off to the major. He says, we got some bad news for you. Your mother's in hospital. Oh, hell, what now? He says, well, we're going to take you to Messina, and you phone home, and you speak to your family, and you find out what's wrong. So, all right. Off I go to Messina. Now you see life again. You know, you're down, and I'm on the ticky box, and I phone home, and shame. I'll probably be forgiven for this, but I speak to my mother's sister. So I said to her, how's my mother? No, she's fine. She's got what do you call longontsteking, pneumonia, but she's fine. So I said, is it life-threatening? No, it's not life-threatening, but we thought we'd let you know. So I said, okay. And then the lights go on. Boop. So as I'm walking back to the driver asked me, how is she? I said, no, she's terrible. It doesn't look good. So I go back to the cab. The major, first thing he says to me, how's your mother? I said, no, yeah, they tell me it's not good. She's got pneumonia and she's on a ventilator. And they don't give her much of a chance. He says, okay, now what? You've got an emergency pass. He writes out the pass. He says, go put clean browns on. We're taking you back to the station. So back to the station. I'm on a passenger train. Now we're going back to Joburg. Now this is Thursday. Now, I haven't slept much. And now on the train, there's a lot of loudmouth out, so I can't sleep on the train. So I arrive in Boksburg and yes, go and visit my mother. That time she's at the hospital and she's right. So I spent time with her. Now it's Friday night. You know, I'm on my jaw, you know, you can't, you know, you can't sit at home, you know. So I sort of had a fling with this girl, nothing serious, but, you know, I thought, let me go there and see if I can take her out, you know, because Hilbrow was still alive and well that time. So I go there and I say, hello. I wasn't too excited to see me. I said, well, can we go out tonight? She says, no, she's got other plans. So, yes, I was totally devastated, you know. Well, yes, what's this now, you know, now. So I go home and my sister sees me. She says, what's wrong? I said, no, that woman doesn't want to go out with me. So wait, this girl works with me. I'll phone her. So she phones her. No, she'll go. So I went there, knocked on the door. She opened up the door and she looked at me up and down. She said, hello, I'm Liz. So, hello, I'm Ferdie. So a friend of mine had a party. So we went to the party and we sort of gelled, you know. And about 11 o'clock, normally the house parties end, you know. So I said to her, hell, I feel like going to Hilbrow. She said, let's go. Yes. Now I haven't slept. Now my eyes are like this. So we went to Hilbrow. We sat in that club the whole godlike nacht. And we drove home as the sun was driving up there past the East Gate. The sun was coming up. So, yes, that was now like I dropped off to home. And that night I phoned again. And, yeah, no, we're going out to Saturday night again. And so then Monday morning I had to go back on the train. So I said goodbye and I went to the train. Now I had someone to write to. So we wrote a little bit of letters, you know. And then we're coming back from Messina on the bus. So the guys were jumping off all along the way to go and get their cars. So when you get to Waterkloof Air Force Base, the bus came off that Petersburg highway. And then the highway goes to Jan Smuts. So I jumped off. Now I had my balsack full of clothing. I had my R1 with me and 7 rounds of ammunition. Everything. Now I'm starting hitchhiking. Now it's probably 11 o'clock at night. No one stops there. So all right, now let me start walking. So now I'm walking. Because I must have walked, I was past Irene already. Now it's about 4 in the morning. The car stopped next to me. 3 blacks in the car. And I'm saying, they said, where are you going? I said, no, Boksburg. I said, get in. Hey, I'm thinking, what now? I'm sitting with a rifle. I've got all my ammunition. The army will, if something goes wrong here, I'll be locked up for life, you know. And bless those guys' soul. They dropped me off in front of my house in Boksburg. That gave me faith, eh? So I arrived at about 4 in the morning at home. Everybody happy to see me, go and sleep. The next morning, I'm up early, go back to cloud out, you know, my car. So now I get back at about 1 o'clock. So I phone up Liz. I said, hey, I'm back. She said, I know you're back. Why didn't you come last night? Why didn't you come say hello to me? So then I realized, okay, no, this is nice. And I tell you, from that is history, eh? That's how I met her. So thanks to the army, eh?
Well, you know, let it not be said that we are not romantic on this show. I really like that. I really like that. So the army even supplied you with a wife. I think we can look back and say thank you to, well, it was probably when Magnus who called you up in those days.
Yes.
I'm not sure, probably somebody else. Well, Internet, we've come to the end of this episode, and I say this episode because a man tells me he knows quite a bit more stories, especially with the famous 6-1 mechanized, 6-1 Mech, Roland de Vries and those people. Everybody knows about them. So we're not done with you, Ferdie. We're long not done with you. There will be more episodes. I've also asked him to bring his mates, who was also at Breach 14. Perhaps they can tell us as well what happens. Until we meet again, let me tell you all, you were important. Even if you didn't feel like it like that stage, everybody played a part. And even if people didn't want to hear your story then, we damn well sure want to hear it now. So please contact me if you feel you have a story to tell. I may only get to you 2 months from now, but it doesn't matter. Just contact me. Let us not go into the grave with you. We're getting older. And thank you for listening here. Spread the word, please. And until we meet again, God bless.